I'll be back. Give me 2 seconds.
Wait.
All right, we're about to go live in
All right.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Mind Over Matters, the live stream where your mind actually matters. My name is Simon, and hosting the show with me today is Tak, Adam, and Samad. Every week, the four of us will discuss and debate the hottest topics as requested by our viewers and listeners. We'll be live monitoring the chat and comments on YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram, so please send in your questions or simply tell us what matters are on your mind. Adam, how about we start with you? What topics have we got on for today?
Well, we got two juicy topics to talk about today. One of them is a carryover from last week, because we were talking about coronavirus. We were talking about a bunch of stuff last week. So check us out. Check out our old video if you hadn't caught it yet. Very, very spicy stuff there. But the first topic that we're going to be talking about is cancel culture. Now,
scary.
Yes, scary, very scary, potentially scary, right? Now, I guess for
Walking
people
on
who
thin ice. That's what we're doing.
I guess for people who maybe haven't heard of the term, or maybe aren't, or are like tangentially familiar with the term, cancel culture is kind of seen as a form of like public shaming, or in a way to publicly humiliate people through various platforms, whether it be through social media, whether it be in person, targeted harassment, things like that, to cause maybe kind of damage, social damage, to the person in question, whether they be celebrities, whether they be criminals, whatever it may be. There could be a plethora of different kinds of people who could be the target of something that would be deemed cancel culture. But in the modern sense, it usually comes as social media harassment campaigns or criticism. I don't want to say it's all harassment. Sometimes there can be conflated criticisms and harassment, and they can come out in various types of forms, where people are doing like direct call outs, leaving like negative reviews, doxing, and the like. So as of recent, there's been kind of a big, I guess, controversy that's been happening in the public space, in the form of Ellen DeGeneres. As about last week, 10 of her former staff kind of came out and made allegations about toxic work environments during the Ellen show, that promoted, quote, racism, fear, and intimidation. Now, this is given that the kind of perception that they like to portray on the Ellen show is, oh, hey, look, we're all fun and loving and everybody has a great time and stuff like that. So it is kind of dredging up these allegations and addresses that previously people would have been less inclined to kind of come forward about, because it would be risking their livelihoods, their jobs, their occupation, and maybe potentially being blacklisted in the industry if they had come forward about it. But now that there's one current employee that came out against Ellen as well, but the 10 previous ones, they have less to lose, and therefore they're more willing to come out and talk about those. So I guess I'll first take it to the panel. What do you think about the whole situation with Ellen, first and foremost?
I'm going to stay tight-lipped for now, but if others want to share their thoughts on the matter, I might chime in a little bit later with maybe a different perspective.
Oh, spicy.
Like from the Ellen perspective, I've seen a lot of, come up on social media. Like you said, I think it was a thread on Twitter that started the whole sort of anti-Ellen campaign.
Okay.
And then other people start contributing to it. I think the biggest thing that I remember is seeing, like, as soon as like all this news came out that Ellen DeGeneres said this, did that, mistreated her workers, and then a lot of guests came out and said, "Oh, no, Ellen wouldn't never do that. I know her in person. She's such a nice person.
Yeah, because they watch her every day.
Should never do that. Should never come to my house and freaking, give me gifts just randomly and be a good house guest and invite me to her place. Yeah, she's a really nice person." But like, other than that, and then a lot of like other, like, I guess you could say smaller C-list celebrities have come out and said, yeah, no, like, she was really weird. I can't remember exactly which celebrity it was, but apparently,
Well, I don't know if everybody's watched Everybody Loves Raymond, but the brother
the
brother
brother,
of the
yeah,
main
yeah,
the main character, he kind of came out and said like, oh yeah, Ellen was like pretty abusive against like this celebrity friend of his or whatever. So I remember that being said, but then other people like Katy Perry and whatnot have come out and said like, oh no, Ellen's amazing and stuff like that. Funnily enough, you pointed out the big kind of allegation that came out was from like a BuzzFeed article. Yes, I know
yeah,
BuzzFeed, but yes, a BuzzFeed article, kind of came out with all these people like, talking about like, the toxic work environment and stuff. And then it was a couple of days later that Ellen actually addressed these new revelations and wanted to quote correct the issues. And then the next day, BuzzFeed released another article where a dozen of employees came forward making sexual harassment allegations against some of the top executive producers. So it does seem like an orchestrated plan by at least BuzzFeed to try and put pressure on Ellen and I guess the studio execs there to kind of.
They did get let go, wasn't it? They had to shuffle things around
Is
in the
that so? Is
management.
that what happened?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
remember seeing. Yeah, I think the other interesting thing that I heard about this whole, Ellen DeGeneres topic was, I think it was an Australian guy who interviewed her a few years back, and when he was doing it, he was not like he was told not to look at her.
yeah. She
Yeah,
apparently she hates meeting her guests before like the actual.
yeah. He wasn't allowed to make eye contact. He wasn't allowed to like say hello or say anything. And he found it the whole, of course, like you have to look at the Australian culture and how things work over here. But besides that, he found it really bizarre. And I think it is pretty bizarre to have that kind of mindset where, yeah, you're about to, be interviewed and you're, this public celebrity, you're this public figure, you interact with like, you show that you interact with a lot of like common folk on
Well,
your
I mean, like
show.
as a talk show host, your whole persona is that you're a people's person. Like
Yeah,
they hire you
exactly.
because they know you know how to communicate to people. And
Yeah.
if you're not doing that outside the camera, like
What
it
good?
just
What good are you, mate? What
Yeah,
good are
And
you?
he
exactly.
and she had a crew as well. She had a technical crew, so like they kind of took over the entire segment.
Jeez.
Kind of felt like a hijack.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this the same thing where it's like they were planning to have her host the show, and then because she didn't want to do it or something, they're like, oh, she's now a guest. Like they had to like change everything around just for her. If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not too sure about the details on like what exactly happened, but I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it got resurfaced about Mariah Carey when she was pregnant
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have
how
seen.
she was forced to drink alcohol
Oh,
on the
yeah.
show
Well,
when she didn't want to drink alcohol,
Yeah.
and kind of reveal that she's pregnant when she wasn't too willing to, and then she ended up getting a miscarriage, which doesn't really.
Oh,
like,
subsequently.
yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
shit. Yeah, fair
Yes.
How
enough.
did that,
Yeah.
how did that fly under the radar?
No,
Yeah,
you see,
it's
I knew about.
resurfaced again. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing the video recently where it's like, oh, she didn't want to reveal whether she was pregnant or not, and then Ellen like brought out like some champagne, and then she wouldn't drink it, and that obviously gave it away.
Yeah.
That's obviously, I
think
don't know.
It's cool
Yeah.
to see like all these people are like flying under the radar with this stuff. But like something that I don't sort of like, and I guess it's one of the effects of cancel culture is people start jumping on like the bandwagon, the hate bandwagon. Like Watch Mojo maybe a few years ago did, the 10 nicest things Ellen has ever done for anyone, and then now it's like the 10 worst things that Ellen has done.
Look, Watch Mojo. They got to make their money somehow. Their top 10
Exactly.
lists are pretty good. Just saying.
Yeah, no, they're good. But I'm
Kind of
saying
faulted.
like, it's everyone just jumping, and everyone just out of nowhere. Yeah, Ellen did this, Ellen did that.
Mhm.
Like,
It's popular to do so.
yeah, these interviews they didn't happen like a few days ago.
Yeah.
They happened a while ago. So it's like,
Mariah Carey's interview was literally almost a decade ago, man.
yeah.
So
So
you can
like, why
imagine.
have people?
All right, and she got a miscarriage. Like,
Yeah.
fuck, man, damn.
It's
I find it quite ironic that Ellen is being cancelled. Particularly, I don't know if you guys remember this, but Ellen had a sitcom, and so before she had a talk show, before she had her own talk show, she had her own TV sitcom called Ellen, And on that sitcom, that I think ran for several seasons, maybe 3 or 4 seasons. I'm not sure exactly. And it was very similar to Friends, except it was just around her. So maybe it was very similar to Everybody Loves Raymond, I think.
Raymond or something or whatever.
Yeah.
Just your typical
Very similar sitcom, right? And it was, I think, around season 3, and this would have been kind of late 90s. Around season 3, there was rumors that at the end of the season, the last episode, she was going to come out as being gay.
Oh, okay.
And there was a lot of talk, and you guys, you probably don't remember any of this, but there's a lot of the same conversations we're having today was happening back in the late 90s, around, I think would have been 98 or 9 or something around that time. And the last show aired, and it was a rating success, got enormous viewership, and then there was a lot of the conservative America that were like, oh my God, this is going to normalize homosexuality on the TV screen, and this is wrong, and it's this and that, and so that debate sprung up, and then the show was cancelled the following season. So even though that last episode was such a rating success, and the Ellen show was a rating success, that conservative America in the 90s was not ready to have a openly gay kind of protagonist in a sitcom, and it was cancelled. And so this is not the first time she's been cancelled. Now again,
but
I'm sure the
studio.
studio.
I think
Difference. There's a main difference which I see is like, back then the LGBT community didn't really have like a public figurehead or a voice, so it would have been good for that community to have like someone who I guess at that time was kind of a big figure and someone that people would have I guess looked up to at that time. But the difference here is, and it's not just like now that all this stuff's coming out, people are against her. I remember the LGBT community, especially lesbian community, were not against her, but they didn't really appreciate some of like her public sort of image that she would portray sometimes. So there was this occasion where I think it was at one of the music awards. She made a comment about Katy Perry and like about her female parts, and a lot of people were like, I guess the main argument was that if it was a male making that sort of comment towards Katy Perry, they would be getting bashed online, maybe lose sponsorships, whatever. Like there'd be some repercussions. But for her to do that, like, it was sexist, and it viewed made Katy Perry look like just like a woman or just a pair of female parts. But not,
like exploiting her for being
but not like actually talking about her winning an award that night or like congratulating her or anything. So it's like that made the lesbian community look pretty bad, and I don't think the lesbian community were happy with that either. So I guess that's the difference between then and now.
I kind of want to steer away from Ellen in particular and just want to talk about cancel culture in general terms. And this is my take. Now, cancel culture to me isn't something new. It's not some kind of new thing that's just sprung out in the last 5 or 10 years or whatever. It's the term is new, but the phenomena is not. With the phenomena of basically mobs coming after a particular public figure or celebrity is nothing new. It's not new. It's not new for me. I've seen it happen, as I mentioned, with Ellen. It still happens, not just with these communities. Like if I and I'll make a list of things that have been happening for a long time, but if we were to, if we view it in the lens of a culture war, we can call it cancel culture. And to me, that's what it is. It's just when a mob decides to set what the social norms are, and they basically get a whole bunch of people around them to support this. So it's the mob setting cultural norms, and what's happening with Ellen, and what we've seen with happen not just with Ellen, but we saw this with Kevin Hart, right? It was a couple of years ago with the awards show. It's something that a public figure or a celebrity has said, and it could have been said any time in their career. It could have been 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years. It does not matter. But these groups, these mobs, what they want to do is they want to say, hey, this is, I don't care when you said it, but I'm going to make an example of you so that this becomes taboo, and we set a new social norm, a new cultural norm, that this is not acceptable. And this has been going on for a long time. And it's not just the left that engages in it. It's the right have been doing it for a long time. And I want to give you some examples of this.
Before you go on to the examples, I want to
Sure.
pose a question to the audience here. Think about a time where a celebrity or someone's been cancelled, someone prominent. I want to hear just from the audience, like maybe in the chat below, or maybe like DM us or whatever, of an example of when a celebrity was, I guess, falsely cancelled. Because I feel like that's the thing. Like people, they just jump to conclusions about someone without getting the full evidence. And I want to see if people sort of have a view on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I know definitely there's examples that I'm probably not remembering that when the chat points it out, like, oh yeah,
I definitely know.
So I'm going to take it even one step further. I'm going to ask the audience.
Oh, Johnny Depp. Depp, we got one from the chat.
I'm going to ask the audience if anyone, and it's not just the audience, the panel as well, if you can cite me anyone that has actually been actually cancelled, that have become completely irrelevant from the public. Well, so Harvey Weinstein's an example, but someone that has been cancelled and just didn't deserve it. Like Harvey Weinstein is an example of someone who absolutely deserved it.
Johnny Depp.
So Johnny, how is Johnny Depp? He's still making movies. He's still making movies. He's not.
Yeah, sure,
cancelled
but he lost a movie opportunity.
Kevin Spacey's one as well.
For false allegations made against him, and then which were perpetuated in the cultural zeitgeist and on social media about how he was a wife beater, an abuser. This is the way I see cancel culture, right? In terms of its why people don't like it, right? Because it's essentially mob mentality, right? People just picking and choosing sides and then trying to remove somebody or harm them, whether it be usually it would be financially, but there are like kind of smaller cases of things happening more physically. Those are less frequent. We got another
have they
comment.
I'm looking at the comments, and some Johnny Depp is one that comes up.
As a modern example, at least that comes to mind, because it wasn't until like a year later that all the stuff with his court case came out, and people are now kind of switching and being like, oh wait, he didn't actually do all these things. He actually had his like thumb cut off. He actually
he was the victim.
Yeah, he was the victim.
And again, I mean, I think the case is still ongoing anyway. So,
but he was cancelled in between that period. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's like a temporary period. There was a period of time where his reputation was tarnished and he lost opportunities in his job. This could have happened to anyone.
I mean,
this
could have been, there were like people in
but is that? So my point on this is that I don't see that necessarily being cancel culture. I mean, we can call it that if we want, but
that's what people are calling that.
Public figure and a celebrity that someone makes an allegation about is going to go under scrutiny. Generally, people will tend to believe the woman. It's just the culture that we live in, and we can discuss about how to make that a little bit more fair, but that tends to happen. He was still getting movie contracts. He may have missed out one or two, but he's certainly not. He hasn't lost his living from those
mean,
allegations.
Yeah, but
right?
how much should
There are a
someone
lot of
lose?
and
there are a
I'm
lot of people who are trying to boycott
Well, we're lucky he's a celebrity.
the Harry Potter movie that he was going to do.
Oh,
That he did,
Fantastic
the
Beast?
Fantastic Beast.
Fantastic
Yeah,
Beast, yeah.
He's on two.
when he got
Yeah.
cast as well, it was undisclosed
Grindelwald.
at the
Grindelwald.
time.
Grindelwald,
but
yeah.
At the
Well, yeah,
time,
true. They did.
wanted
They
to
did
keep it
a
a secret. They just switch around. Should have put a spoiler warning, mate.
Ah, yes. Well, the movie's been out for like 4 years, mate.
It's
So
been,
come
it's
on.
been out for a while, but yeah.
To be fair, I haven't watched it either. I don't really care
Okay.
too much about Harry
First
Potter.
one or the second one?
Neither. Hot
Well,
take.
I
I
mean,
don't like
he's
Harry
in-
Potter.
He's
Hot
in
take.
both, but yeah, like a lot of the Harry Potter fandom weren't happy, and they're like, "Oh, how can you know, cast him? You know, he's got all these allegations against him, accusations. Like he shouldn't be in this." But then the studio, they had a lot of faith in him, a lot of trust in him, so they went forward with it, and that happened. But that almost didn't happen, you know. And whether the movie was
but
a
it
flop
happened,
or not,
but it
that's
still
different.
happened. And
Yeah.
and
Okay, but how much? Okay, but how much?
I'm trying to make is that cancel culture to me, if it starts to harm, you know, kind of regular people, it would bother me. But if you're a public figure or a celebrity, people are going to scrutinize what you do, and this is part and parcel of being a public figure or a celebrity. And it is like if you're a celebrity or a public figure, you'd have to take those hits. And I know, I mean, it's having false accusations is horrible. They certainly have the power. Like look at Harvey Weinstein, for example. The reason he got away with what he did for such a long time is because he has power and wealth, right? He should have been cancelled a lot sooner. And
I mean, people were making jokes about Harvey Weinstein for like decades. Like,
absolutely.
South Park made jokes about the Weinsteins for ages. But I think taking the cancel part too literally is, I think, the issue here. Like, I think damaging people's reputations based on allegations is what is dangerous. You know, like this should have just been like the whole issue between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp should have been taken to a legal court rather than the court of public opinion, which I think is the problem with cancel culture and the thing that people don't like about it. Because when it does happen to people who are innocent, or potentially innocent, not to say, because I think with everything that's happening with Johnny Depp, it's kind of showing that, well, he wasn't like the best husband. He's just not he's not the you know, the serial wife beater that he's being portrayed to being. He's still a party guy. He still does drugs. He still does all that. But the allegations made with him, you know, what he did to Amber, those are the things that people are questioning. Sorry.
Someone in the chat was saying.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So Alif from the chat is saying Bill Cosby, and I think that's interesting as well, because it kind of reinforces one of like the pros of cancel culture, which is a lot of people, especially his own like cast mates. I think it was like a female; she was underage at the time. I don't know the full details, but you know, after allegations came out about him and people have traction about it, there were a lot of people that were contributing, like, oh yeah, but
George.
Bill Cosby did this to me. Bill Cosby.
Whoever Sabik, that's just
Sabik's gonna get us.
That is legendary.
He's gonna get.
Someone said George Pell. For those who don't know, that's a sort of Australian cardinal, right? Who has been accused of covering up, if not himself
the government
committing,
didn't cancel him,
committing, you know, pedophilia. So
the whole Catholic Church behind it.
Within the Catholic Church. So anyway, that is another topic for another time.
A top comment.
But it's thanks for making me laugh, Sabik.
That was a good comment.
But what you were saying about Bill Cosby?
Bill Cosby, yeah, like a lot of people didn't come out about Bill Cosby until the whole cancel culture mentality started getting around Bill Cosby, and all these people came out about what they, you know, it gives courage to a lot of the victims that didn't have the courage to talk about it before, because no one would believe them. I mean, Bill Cosby was such a beloved figure in the African American community. You say anything about him, people are like, hey, like, watch your mouth. Bill Cosby is my hero, right? And then now it's completely different because people actually have, I guess, the courage to talk about it, whereas before they couldn't even say anything about him.
Well, would it be better for people to well, this is the problem, right? Like, and this is part of the reason why the legal system functions under a assumption. Well, unless you're in Japan. In Japan, you're guilty until proven innocent. It's a very interesting system, I must say. But you know, in Western countries, it's innocent until proven guilty, because again, we kind of put the importance of having to prove people to, you know, your peers or the judge or whatever, that beyond a reasonable doubt that you're guilty of the crimes that you've committed. Because if you're innocent, and there's plenty of instances of people being put behind bars for like murdering people, rape, that they didn't do, right? You know, when they didn't have DNA evidence and whatnot. And that's the danger of kind of jumping. And look, there's a really good book. Maybe some people have read it. It's called To Kill a Mockingbird, right? And that's like a great, fantastic book.
Really good.
Really good.
And that was like my first kind of exposure to like from a literacy context of a situation. And for people who haven't read it, it's about an African American man who gets falsely accused of sexually assaulting a woman and is put on trial by the town. And yeah, like in that book, it kind of shares the kind of problems with mob mentality. And I think that's ultimately that's where it comes back down to me. It's like that's the danger of cancel culture, that it can potentially lead to people's reputation, or you know, maybe even their persons being potentially harmed in some capacity if we as a society like allow it to kind of continue in a dangerous way, at least, you know. Like there's nothing wrong with calling people out.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up To Kill a Mockingbird, because 12 Angry Men was like my kind of introduction to a legal system as well, and it kind of follows the same sort of idea that you're talking about as well, of like how mob mentality can influence people. So yeah, it was interesting to see, like, from a literary perspective.
We've got another chat.
I was just gonna say one thing before we move on. What about legacy? You know, you look at Michael Jackson. You know, they've got a documentary about him. They're saying a whole lot of stuff about him, and of course, he's not here to defend himself or to give the other side of the story. He could be guilty, but what about that? Because you know, he's, of course, like, it has taken a hit at his, you know, the legacy, even his popularity. So that's also canceling someone, but because they're not there anymore, they can never say anything, right? You only get one side of it.
I don't know. The term is, this is the problem I have with the actual term itself.
I think you shouldn't take the term literally. It shouldn't be cancelled. It's just people trying to attempt like even you know, the kind of the definition that I was actually taking was for, I believe, social like something. But anyways, the point is like damaging people and trying to publicly humiliate them, and if we kind of take it from that context, which I think what most people, it isn't just like, oh, they're like, we exile them from society.
There's a legal term for that, and that's defamation. And if someone is committed, you know, falsely accused you of something, you have legal avenues to remedy that situation, and that's called defamation.
Defamation has like defamation has like one of the highest like legal like burdens that you have to prove.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Even like it's the same. And there's a reason for that, but at the same time, people, you can get around like, you know, defamation clauses by saying, oh well, I've heard people say that you're a rapist, right? Like, that's not me directly calling you a rapist, but it gets around the clause of defamation because I'm not directly accusing you of something, right? But like we understand the implications when people do. But
in the case of the Amber Heard situation, right? That false allegation, absolutely. If Johnny Depp were to take that to court, he's got a leg to stand on, right?
Maybe he should,
as a defamation case. And my point is, the reason I don't want to be wedded to the term cancel culture, because to me it's such a vague, like, catch-all hodgepodge phrase. It's like it just encompasses so many different things, like from the situation around Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, to Ellen DeGeneres, to people who are who just want to be able to say like really horrible things about people, right? So it's just such a broad term, and I want to just cite some examples of things that we don't think of as cancel culture, but because the term is so broad, that it really encompasses that too. And before I continue, I just wanted to mention that we do have a special guest who's in our waiting room at the moment. So maybe Tak, if you can reach out to him and say we're just wrapping up this topic, and maybe we'll admit him in a moment. But just going back to the cancel culture, it's been done for a long time. And for example, and I hope criticism of Israel, right? If you criticize Israel, then if you're a public figure or a celebrity and you criticize Israel, and this has happened very recently, you will be cancelled, right? Yeah. And this is not something that's new. It's been happening for at least 30 to 40 years, at least 30 years. Not in just the United States, all over the world, including Australia. If you're in support of the BDS movement, which is the movement around Palestine, you will be silenced. And if you're if you're a public figure and you show support for BDS, then forget about it. You will be cancelled, according to the definition of cancel culture, because it's so broad. Communism and communists, and I'm not going to name any, but if if you promote communism in the United States in any way, there's a high likelihood, if you're a public figure or a celebrity, you will be made a target of by not just by a public raging mob, but the media as well. Yeah. If you talk about and again look at Muhammad Ali and black rights activists around the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and what happened to them, right? We can call that cancel culture. There's just countless other
what you're really describing is like spicy topics that people aren't allowed to talk about, which I understand, but that's different from actually canceling individuals over something.
I don't see the difference, because
I think the difference is that back in the days, cancel culture was literally like, as what you're describing, right? But these days it's more there's two sides to it. There's like cancel culture that comes from like, well, it's not really cancel culture. It's literally deplatforming you, or, like you said, if you say anything against Israel, you get kind of, it's not cancelled. I don't know what the word is for it, but like it's something
No,
different.
you absolutely do get cancelled. If you say something in against Israel or in support of BDS, you literally won't have a show.
But what I'm trying to describe is cancel culture in itself is like, okay, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, that was like, I feel like social media was a big drive for it to happen, and like a whole bunch of people coming up. It's more like unearthing things about you that people were trying to hide.
So you're saying
that's cancel culture.
It's targeting specific individuals and trying to cancel them out.
Yeah.
Well, again, harm their reputation, remove their ability.
I just don't see.
It's two different things for me.
You're mentioning topics that people can be cancelled over, right? Like that's completely like there's a complete different like. There's a delineation between those things. Like those things that you've mentioned, like, talking about like Israel, talking about all of that, those are topics that can get you cancelled, right? And the cancelling culture is around people being cancelled for talking about controversial things, or on top of that, things that they've done in the past. Like, for example, if it came out that they've engaged in, sexually assaulting someone, or, behind the scenes, like, bribery or things like that. Like they all kind of come under the umbrella of trying to cancel people, usually like, opponents or enemies or people that you don't like, right? They'll use these kind of topics, they'll use these opinions against you to remove you, to deplatform you. And I think that's the difference that I guess we're trying to point out here. Like all the things that you've talked about, yes, they exist, and yes, people have been cancelled and removed for talking about them. I guess we're just specifically talking about like other examples that aren't necessarily hot button political issues, right? Like for example, all the stuff that's happening with Ellen, like that's all comes from like that's not a toxic environment. That's there's a lot of like sexual assault allegations, but I think we should move
on to the next topic.
This topic, because it is spicy. And look, to be fair, there's going to be someone else who's cancelled, and we'll talk about this topic.
There's a lot to talk about. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's revisit this for another time. And Tak, do you want to introduce our next guest?
Yeah, so our next guest today is Ali Qureshi. I actually met him, I've known him for a while. I properly talked to him last year about um, very interesting topic, which actually came around today. Fun fact about him, he actually got cast for a role as Harry Potter in Polish. It's a Polish version of Harry Potter. He got cast,
Really?
but he actually denied it because yeah, he was a bit busy. So yeah.
Okay, I don't know.
Everyone,
I don't know if
welcome Ali Qureshi. How are you feeling, man? How you going?
Yeah, happy to be here. I like what you guys were talking about before.
Excellent. No, wait. Were you messing with me, Tak? Was he not, in the Polish version of Harry Potter? I wouldn't know.
I've
I've seen all
I'd
the
play
Harry Potter
along.
movies, mate.
Put some
Don't lie to
glasses
me.
on. Put some glasses on. We'll know.
And learn how to speak Polish.
Yeah, I tell you, I
So-
try to play along, but I can't really do that because
It's
Nah,
a bit of it's a bit of an inside joke.
Okay. Damn.
You'll
But
have
yeah,
to
like,
share that with us another day.
yeah,
Definitely.
I guess to move on to topic number 2, we're talking about should billionaires exist? Now, this was
Whoa,
a
slow
topic,
down.
yeah,
Oh,
this was a topic that
Spicy.
was
Heavy.
Should
given
we
to us
cancel
by
billionaires? Is that what we're saying?
Council
It was
Billy Well.
actually this topic was suggested to us in our Instagram Q&A last week, and I thought it was interesting to do as a whole segment on its own because I knew Ali would know a lot about this topic, and it would be a good way to introduce some other opinions on the matter.
so just for to set things down, can I know where everyone sits around
Whoa.
these positions normally, or
About
how do we
about
how do we want to
billionaires?
shift it?
How,
How do we want to
you
shift the
feel about
goalposts?
billionaires?
Yeah, how do we want to shift the
Yeah.
goalposts to start it?
Just the goal.
All right, well, let's shift it. So,
I love it.
Ali, how about you try and convince me why like billionaires shouldn't exist?
Yes, I too need to be convinced.
I
too.
need to be
Same.
convinced. But I certainly sympathize with it.
Simp.
In simp. I'm simping.
Simping for the
Simping for
billionaires.
billionaires.
Put Daddy
I
Bezos. I'm
sympathize
not going to buy you a house,
with
man.
the fact that there's a lot of
I'm not going to buy you a
inequality.
house.
There's a massive massive inequality gap between some billionaires, billionaires in general, and everyone else. And one way is absolutely to cancel them or
Cancel them.
basically
Eat-
figure
eat
out a
the
way
rich,
to
mate. Eat the rich,
forbid,
mate.
prevent
Let's do it.
billionaires from.
People in the chat are already agreeing with Ali, and he hasn't even
There we go.
spoken yet.
All right,
Sorry.
well, I think you've won this one, Ali.
Chat's on your side, mate.
All right,
No,
done.
let me-
That's the end of the show.
Thanks for joining me.
That's a wrap.
There'll be a poll on Insta. You can let us know. No.
So,
Yeah,
look,
no.
Ali, know this. The audience is probably with you on this. Just maybe the four of us are not yet.
Okay, okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm with Ali.
Well,
Okay.
why are you wearing a red?
As to
Show us what it says.
To-
Yeah, yeah,
to-
tell us
to
what it
convince
says.
you guys.
Commie?
It says
You're wearing your
communism for
colours,
life.
literally.
Yeah. So let us know.
Okay.
I guess maybe your background or maybe your position, whatever you feel comfortable to.
Yep. So
Open.
I'll
This is
just
mind over matters.
No worries. Yeah, I'll set the groundwork for it. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the concept of surplus value, but I think that will lead my discussion well. So
Well, let the chat know as well.
yeah, so that's why I'm letting the audience know, and letting
Yeah,
you
let
guys
him
know
finish,
as well.
mate.
All right. So I guess the way I really want to start about it is, in order to understand. So we're going to break it up into obviously how I think about it from a Marxist or a socialist perspective versus a capitalist perspective. And so in order to understand what capitalism is really about, and what Marx really had in mind, and what really prevented it as an economic system from realizing its original objectives, from how early capitalists led the revolution from feudalism to capitalism. It didn't matter whether this took place in France or United States back in 1700s, the late 1700s, where the main promise of capitalism after coming out of such a horrible system like feudalism were four main things, especially coming out of the French Revolution. And these four things were liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy. So, in my opinion, why has the capitalist system, which sincerely thought that it could and would achieve these things, failed to do so? So that's where I come in with the idea of surplus value. And this is where Marx starts talking about this, and it goes roughly something like this. And let's give it in a modern sense. I've thought of an example just to help formulate this analysis from Marx. So let's imagine like a worker coming to an employer and sitting down and going over with the employer the conditions of the job, that the worker, would like to have a certain amount of money. They're going to arrange the tools that they're going to use. They're going to arrange the things that are going to happen in the workplace. Then we get to the question of how much am I going to get paid? And we'll illustrate this with an example. So imagine the employer agrees and the employee agree on $15 an hour. The worker will come to work, get paid upon the agreed hours and the conditions that the worker gets. And Marxist analysis goes like this. The reason the employer is obviously able to give the worker $15 an hour is because during each hour, the worker will add to the value of what the capitalist sells. Mm-hmm. So in this case, the worker is going to bring more value than $15. So one of the virtues of understanding capitalism in this way is it shows you the parallels between slavery and feudalism. In slavery, the slave produces the output, a part of which is returned to him. So he can continue slaving and the master continues to get the other part, which is the majority of it. Similarly, in feudalism, the serf does a lot of the work and keeps part of what he produces and then delivers the other part as a rental payment to the lord. In capitalism, you get the same thing, but it's more obscure, which is why we have to make this analysis. And the value added versus the value paid allows you to understand how and why not capitalism itself could break from the dualism and this dichotomy of master and slave, or serf and lord. And this answers the question why we couldn't have liberty, equality, or fraternity, or democracy, because you didn't make the break from those earlier class-divided systems. You thought capitalism would achieve that because capitalism brought us a new dichotomy. Instead of master and slave, or serf and lord, like I've just said, we get employer and employee. And there lies the reason why capitalism could never deliver its promise from its origination, at least in the revolutionary transition from the economic system that we had in the 18th and 19th century. So I've just laid off a bit of groundwork for you guys. I'll see what you guys think about it. But in terms of that,
yeah, I was
why
going
do
to
you think
interject with a
people
question
say?
if that's okay, Ali. I just want to kind of
Go on,
because you did
please.
mention you probably get asked this a lot. So
Yep.
it's not a new unique question of any sort. But
Sure.
So you mentioned that there's a social these social goals that you mentioned, right? So liberty, fraternity, democracy. These have not. Capitalism has failed to achieve these social goals, right? I agree with these social goals, and I think we ought to. And again, it's an ought thing for me that we ought to have these and ought to achieve these. So let's say, for argument's sake, capitalism has failed to achieve this. For argument's sake, can you give me an example where a socialist nation state anywhere in history has been able to achieve this purely based on either implementing a Marxist economic system, or just any one of the various socialist economic systems?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you guys have heard about the Mondragon economy. The Mondragon economy is the 7th biggest economy in Spain. It's in Basque Spain. And the idea was to transform the workplace into a democratic enterprise. This is my solution as a socialist, as a Marxist, where all the workers, one person, one vote, make decisions, where there's no longer the employee and the employer dichotomy. So all these people in the Mondragon economy, and it's been there for ever since maybe I think the 40s, where the workers together.
Are you talking about the Spanish economy?
No, I'm talking about the seventh largest corporation in Spain, which is worker owned.
Right.
And that's
so it's a
the example
cooperative of
which you
some
asked
sort.
me. It's a worker-owned cooperative where all the workers get to talk about and democratically talk about what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and I guess what should be done with the fruits of the labor that has come out. And it's one of the most successful enterprises over there. And you asked me for an example, but we have to also make sure that we also make the distinction that the reason why a lot of these systems haven't been able to be developed is obviously, which is maybe a topic for another time, because if we talk about, why hasn't this worked, it's a kind of different kind of topic, but the idea is the reason that this hasn't happened is obviously the pure dominance of the capitalist system to propagandize, to manufacture the consent of people, to control markets, to control the economy, and to stifle any competition that it gets from any democratic notion in any society whatsoever. So I'll let you take on that, and I'll see what you guys have to say about that.
I've got a lot of things to kind of discuss on this, but I might let want some of the other panelists.
Yeah, I'll kind of take it, because thing is, my view on it is pretty short, and you guys can add to it, maybe make me think in a different perspective. But for me, it's just, in my perspective is that the only reason billionaires can exist in a capitalist society is because they bypass or find shortcuts to get around tax, like paying tax. I actually did some research and I looked into the IRS, and it was only the top 1% of taxpayers were likely to avoid taxes. So in the next decade, we might have even trillionaires, because compared to, let's say, like a decade ago, there's, I think, 3% less employees that the IRS have employed. So they don't have enough people to actually audit millionaires and billionaires. So I think, in 2011, there were 12% of millionaires being audited, and this year it's only 3%, and that's just the millionaires, right? So they're avoiding a lot of tax, and I think like tax laws for them are becoming,
it's all based on
smaller
profit,
as well.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's the laws are becoming less and less strict. I think in the 70s, CEOs were getting taxed around 50%. Now I think it's only like 1%. So that's the biggest difference for me. And I don't think you can't have billionaires without avoiding tax or bypassing it. And I think, for a society to blossom the way it should, or to equally distribute wealth, there needs to be harsher tax laws. I'm not against the idea of billionaires if they abide by tax laws, or like if the government can find a way to redistribute their wealth to everyone else. That's my.
Well, technically, they do abide by the tax laws, right? Like
Yeah,
that's,
I mean, the problem is there's
that's
too
the
many
problem,
loopholes
right?
in
Like
the
that's the
tax
biggest
law.
problem.
They have tax laws that.
Samad's got it right there. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Go, Samad. I wanna hear more.
There's entire departments within these capitalist institutions that are dedicated to tax avoidance, and they can spend $10 million to pay tax lawyers to work out loopholes and to restructure the company to avoid paying tax, so that they don't have to pay $11 million of tax, right? Because they're still $1 million ahead. And so they'll continue to do that. And the capitalists, certainly capitalist institutions, have a lot more money to spend on staying ahead of the legislation,
Legalese,
right? And find loopholes before the tax authorities can close those loopholes.
They can also influence the government with their legislation by, saying, "Oh, we'll give you this incentive, that incentive."
so here's the thing, right? Like the problem with kind of high taxation of like the rich in general is when they get taxed too highly, or when they have their assets kind of redistributed, as one could say, they start moving to other countries
Yeah,
that won't give them.
as said in the comments,
Or
someone.
move their
Oh,
business to
oh,
another
did someone
country.
say that? You see, chat very smart.
yeah,
Chat
yeah,
high IQ.
yeah,
Yeah.
All right.
Our audience, they know their stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously the kind of line that we'd have to kind of measure, that like governments and stuff have to measure, because if you start taxing people who are rich, they start to try and go elsewhere where that they won't be as quote unquote oppressed, and have their assets taken and try and redistribute their wealth, because the wealthy, what they try to do is they just try to get more rich, right? They have capital, they're able to use their capital to reinvest it in other kind of startups or whatever it may be, companies, and they just try and get more rich, right? That's the incentive. That's the reason why the rich get richer, because again, they are trying to use what wealth that they have and try and become more wealthy. It doesn't necessarily mean that trickle down economics and everybody gets rich and everybody can buy a Ferrari and stuff. Doesn't mean that that happens, but fundamentally that's the incentive that a lot of governments want to actually try and like be careful about when it comes to overtaxation of the rich, because if they if you start taxing them in, like, let's say one state too much, they might just move to another state and do whatever business that they want to do over there. So and it can kind of extend to countries too. Like if you do it in one country, they'll go to another country. So maybe like a solution would have to be like, everybody has to have like a global kind of agreement that we're not going to allow these billionaires to run away to other countries, and we're going to, wherever they go, they're going to be under these kind of stipulations. But I don't know.
So I think what you're seeing, Ali, is there's a lot of sympathy for what you're talking about around kind of the inequality and how capitalist institutions and organizations are basically rorting the system, right? And we agree that we need to be able to kind of rein that in. And Adam's pointed out how complex it is to do that, because they've got, these companies have enough wealth to keep moving about to different, wherever the legislation is more in their favor, and they'll continue to do that. So until you have something like a United Nations that said if you're party of the UN, then you have to have the same tax policies, then there's not many places that they're left to go to, right? So
I think the EU is probably the closest at trying to establish something like that, right? Like they have like their own kind of they do have their own kind of separate market economies, and they function differently, but even within there are like kind of rules and regulations that they all have to kind of abide by and be like, yes, in order to be part of the EU, we are following X and Y. And so it would be difficult for companies to kind of still operate within the, I don't know how many countries are in the EU, I'm not sure, but operate within those kind of confines. But maybe they'll be like, oh, let's just move to Russia or something. They probably wouldn't, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they might. But so Samad, did you want to say something?
No, I was gonna say, Adam, yeah, what do you think about everything that Ali had to say? But I think you kind of answered it.
Which part?
Well,
I was just talking about the different. Yeah,
I kind of, if that's okay, Ali, because you did say that there was one particular co-op within Spain that does operate. So the thing is that at scale, when I say at scale, when you've got a large population, does that system function in the same way? I think is yet to be proven. You've cited a good example, and I need to take a little bit more of a look into that. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. Adam, go ahead.
Actually, I just have a question for Ali as well. With the what is it called? Maltese?
Mondragon.
So with Mondragon, you know how like you were saying that all the workers have a say in terms of where the direction that the company goes and maybe the production and what they do. Do individuals have a say, or do they have representatives that they kind of they represent like this department or this kind of section of people? Because I know in some kind of worker co-ops that is something that can happen as well, but I'm not too sure about that particular company, like, you know, whether people actually have a true say in the direction, or whether they have a representative, and then it's like a 50% majority, you know, even in those kind of situations, it's not necessarily true representation of the workers' will, right?
Well, the main distinction to make is there's a lot of things that you guys mentioned there. So the main distinction to make is that these worker cooperatives are owned by the workers themselves. They're not shareholders in the company. So if they're owners, that means they get democratic input into what happens into the workplace. There for all the business decisions, for all the main business decisions, they're not managers. That's the distinction that we got to make. They're not managers. They are owners, and that's
Sure.
why they have a say in these things. Because if everyone was a manager, that just wouldn't work. But they have
Do they run?
a
Do they run
democratic
more like
vote.
a LLC?
Mondragon. Oh, it's a cool name, Mondragon. Nice.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what an LLC means.
it's like
Limited liability company. It's
yeah.
like an LTD.
No,
Yeah,
they
limited.
run.
Everyone's just a partner.
No, that's what. So that's what the main thing is. Does that still have employers and employees?
They look at themselves as partners. So even if, okay, let's say you started the company, someone else who is just, I guess, under you, they're still a partner. It's just, I guess, it depends on the state, like how much of
Yeah,
the
like
company
yeah,
they-
like do. Yeah, because that's what I'm wondering.
There's
as
a lot
well,
of
like,
well-known partnerships. So
Yeah.
you know the Big Four, for example, right? Big Four accounting firms, right? PwC, Deloitte, EY. These are all partnerships, and the partners are the ones making the decisions, not the employees. Though I don't know of any organization apart from now. I know of Mondragon, but I
There's
don't
heaps
know
in
of
the
any
United
others.
States.
That give workers the ability to vote on every single thing within the organization.
How
To
many
me, I feel
people
like
are-
how do you even make decisions when you've got everyone in the organization voting on everything?
Yeah, like what's the veto? Like, you know, when you have like a board of directors or something that kind of drive the direction of a company, you know, it's kind of limited to like those people, and you know what they're beholden to, what is it, stockholders and whatever. But you know, with a company like this, like, you know, how many people, and if everybody's working and can choose the direction of the company, like, you know, would one person be able to veto the direction? Like, if I didn't like it, like if we were in like, you know, like 7,000 people hypothetically, would one vote be able to like be like, oh well, we're not going this way? Like I guess that's what I'm wondering. Like
Well,
what is the power that an individual has in this kind of corporation?
well, obviously you got to understand that the difference between the capitalist system and a worker co-op system would
Well, that's
mean
what
that
I'm wondering.
that people will work in the interest of the workers. So there's not gonna be much of a distinction between the interest of the workers, because it's a collective response. But if we're talking about a board of directors, for instance, they're the only ones that are making the decisions on behalf of many other people. So that's the thing that is happening, and that's the distinction that we have to make. And yeah, that's why we
That's
have to
why-
realize these things. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's why I'm
that-
wondering what happens at this company. Do the individuals, can one person veto the direction of like 100 other people?
No, of course not.
then
That's
how does
why
it
it's a
function?
democratically owned. Well, you have people that elect certain like officials based on many departments. They get together, but they're elected people, and they all own a share in this. So whatever the decision comes down to, obviously that these decisions are going to be made in the interest of the collective. And just to say just to give you another example, this thing has worked. There's thousands of examples of worker co-ops in the US now, and they're slowly growing. But the thing is that people have to realize that these cooperatives are only for the interest of the collective. That's why when we're talking about a board of directors, 15, 20 people make a decision for 1,000 people. How is that fair? Do you know what I mean?
But wouldn't there be an opportunity for corruption? Because it's a voting system, so you could get a group of people on your end. Because let's talk about it when it moves into bigger scales. There's more at stake, and like you said, you know, everyone's an equal shareholder, right? What about the possibility of corruption? Because that essentially what happens.
And just to kind of elaborate on that,
To drive the whatever the final decision is, you could get certain group on your end by whatever means, and there you go. You have
There's some activity going on in the chat as well. Some
yeah,
people
let's
have
get some
not so
chat
much
feedback.
questions, but they have a lot of statements in the.
Oh yeah. Let me
Yeah, a
hear.
lot of
Let me hear
people
these
think-
statements.
Juicy statements. Let's
Yeah,
go.
give me these spicy statements.
So Hibo said, "Isn't that time consuming for the business?" And Tohid, I think, is replying to her saying that there'll definitely need to be a system to control this.
Yeah,
and who controls the system? And
Well,
then again,
Control
that's
the
where
system. Those
Pardon?
workers-
I just
why-
wanted to. I just wanted to
Wait,
kind
wait,
of
let him.
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
Ali,
Sorry,
if you can
Ali,
finish your
sorry,
thought,
go
I just
ahead.
want to rein this back into should billionaires exist?
Yeah, billionaires.
Which is the real topic, but this is really important stuff, right? I think everyone who's listening, including us and including you, Ali, we certainly agree that there needs to be some more equal distribution, or some more fair distribution, maybe not equal, but fair distribution of wealth. And I personally don't see that a cooperative or thousands of small cooperatives, how that scales out to an organization as large as, let's say, Microsoft or Amazon or Costco, being able to function in that way successfully and innovate, and bring new products to consumers in an efficient way, and results in competition and innovation. I don't see that happening in cooperatives, but if you can tell me how that's possible, and how that's also possible when you take a cooperative or that system, right, this Marxist system, and you apply it at a nation state level, because it's fine maybe at small organizational scales, but at a nation state level, what does that look like? Is there a successful example of that?
Well, I gave you the example of the Mondragon economy before, obviously, but let's look at an example, because you spoke about a lot of things. You spoke about innovation, and you spoke about maybe a little bit about risk. I feel like it was involved in your discussion. The capitalist takes the risk, and in capitalism there is innovation. So let's take in a capitalist system, there's a new invention, for instance, one that makes the workers, let's say, twice as productive as they were before, right? Let's take a simple example: a factory of 100 workers producing output. What does the capitalist do when this new technology has arrived? He fires half the workers and buys the machine, because with half the workers, he can produce just as much as he did before, sell at the same price, get the same revenue, but his profit will go up, because half of the revenue that he used to pay before, he doesn't need to pay, because now he keeps it for himself, because he fired half the people. So if the workers ran the factory, what would happen?
But so is your problem that the capitalist?
Well, wouldn't that
that would still happen. That would still happen.
That would happen regardless.
in a worker co-op.
Efficiency, right?
Okay. So let me explain it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
What happens in a worker co-op? I was just getting to the point. So for them, for the workers, there's another solution, because they all own the enterprise, and that would lead to the same revenue and the same product, the same productivity. Everybody works half a day.
What about
instead.
efficiency?
Hold on, the efficiency is the same.
Okay,
because
so you work half a day.
Because everyone works half a day, the same output's being produced, because everyone's working half the hours, and the machines are still twice as productive. So,
but how's that fair if someone works half the day, but someone else across the road, who's in maybe a different part of in a different company, is working full hours but getting same equal pay?
What about a different part of the same company? What if that machine?
I'll get to that in a second. So the workers decide, if they were in charge, to take the benefit of the technology in the form of the increase in leisure, right? So we don't have a system that allows the democratic option to become operative, because capitalists don't permit that. So as a result, to have less workers, the workers have to have more work. The workers have to fight, because there's no incentive in capitalism for the capitalists to ever give, this option to them. And that's why we fought with, that's why there's, trade unions and they've never acted in this way to help the people. So now I'll let you guys tell me what you guys think about that, and then I'll move on to what you guys were asking me about. So what do you guys think about? What do you guys think about that?
Well, so a couple of things. Again, I want to keep coming back to this point because if at the so you've spoken about cooperatives and how they might function, right? So worker cooperatives, but do you also believe that that the state should hold the means of production, right? So not the state.
How does the state hold the means of production if the people own the means of production?
So you want people to hold the means of production, but then when you've got is there any innovation that you can cite that any of these cooperatives, the thousands of cooperatives that exist, that they've created?
What do you mean? Is there any?
So is there a particular innovation in technology?
I can ask you the same question.
Well, we're using one right now.
Hold on, but I can ask you the exact same question about does capitalism promote innovation?
Well, we're using a product as a result of innovation. So if you think about, before Zoom, you had, Skype, and you had, Teams, and you had a plethora, which is a word that our audience really likes, a plethora of other,
including, even your headphones. You look at the computer you're using.
The reason we're not using those tools and we're using this is because Zoom, even though they were later to the game, they innovated a lot faster than their competitors, and as a result, they've produced a product that outperforms their competitors, and people have more efficiently and priced more efficiently or appropriately and fairly, which is why more people are using Zoom than some of the products that have been out there for a lot longer.
So that's actually a myth.
Okay.
Go on, please carry on. Please carry on. Please carry on.
No, but explain.
Wait. What is a myth, and how is what a myth?
The myth is that capitalism promotes innovation. Yeah. Is that the claim that you guys are making? Just to get.
I don't think it's a myth. I've seen it.
You're calling it a myth. I guess
I'm calling it a myth. Let me.
Yeah. I guess explain to us and the audience what you mean by that.
Okay. So.
Because I'm open to innovation being a myth under capitalism.
Okay. So let's look at a computer, for instance, or the internet, or the lasers or satellites. They were run. Where'd they come from? Where do you think these things came from? Do you think these things came from a capitalist putting in money trying to make profit? A lot of the time, that's not actually true. A lot of the time, 2/3 of all innovations are made by the state. So taxpayers pay for it because, for example, in the 1960s, for instance, the Soviet Union was the biggest threat. So the Pentagon was investing in all these technologies, and they have for example, in universities, they have in MIT, they have all these little institutions where they're developing, and it's paid by the state sector itself. And that's why Bill Gates is the richest man in the world, because they take upon the innovations of people who create and produce these things, and then based on the taxpayers' money. And at the end of the day, what happens? The people don't get the share of these technologies and their profit in the capitalist system. What happens is a couple of people get that. So this is a capitalist.
So you cited two examples here. The NASA, right? So NASA sending the first man on the moon, and how NASA as an institution is completely funded by people, right? So
government organization.
It's a government, absolutely. And then the other one I think you said is that the internet itself, or maybe you're referring to computing in general, was that innovation came out of state-funded institutions as well. So it was funded by the people. So I want to address the NASA one first. We've only now, through SpaceX and a number of other space kind of organizations, we've started to capitalism has started to to look into space itself as an enterprise. Prior to that, the barrier to entry into those industries are way too high for capitalists to even consider. So I'm not saying that one is going to be. So my point is that with NASA, the trillions of dollars needed to be invested was not going to come from capitalists, because it needed to be done. The barrier to entry into that sector is just way too high. And the same was with infrastructure, for example, roads or building like a high-speed internet, right? This is an enterprise that can't be done by a bunch of capitalists. It needs to have state funding, because it's a common purpose, right? So space travel, you can't have the barrier to entry is way too high. Same thing. So now we're starting to see, SpaceX and I think you mentioned another one, where so what?
Blue Origin.
Yeah. So they're gonna. Yeah. We just saw what they built. They're able to achieve what NASA spent trillions of dollars building, right, of taxpayer money, and
they're all trying to
they can make a space mission for 1/10 the cost of NASA can do. So
and they were able to land, they were able to reuse everything.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
the rockets.
crazy.
Yeah,
That's
Falcon 9.
amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. It still blows my mind that that's happened recently. I want to go to space, guys. Space Force. Let's go.
It's the wave.
So, and the second example that you cited, I think maybe it was about the computing innovation, or maybe the invention of the internet. Absolutely, the internet was discovered by a university research team, right? If I'm correct, but it's available, and look at what we now are able to do because of that invention. But should we all profit from that? There's another way of doing that, and that's through taxation, right? We share in the wealth of the wealth that these organizations and institutions, capitalist institutions, that they produce this enormous wealth, and we share in that wealth by taxing them appropriately. So the solution to me seems like more appropriate taxing of these organizations, rather than saying that let's completely change the system and institute maybe some form of socialism that we've tried in the world in various forms. And I don't know, but I don't want to, and I'm not going to go through the numbers.
Don't go there. You don't want to. You shouldn't probably go there.
It's not. They're not. They're not really great. Examples. And some of well-known.
Whenever
socialists, when I say
socialists,
and I don't mean it in a derogatory term, right? So the way I see it is that if you blame capitalism for some of the failures that we're seeing today, that's not fair, because the system that we have, not just in Australia but in the United States, is actually a mix between the two. So it's a really complex mix. Right. So if you say, well, all of these failures are because of capitalism, I would say, well, we don't really have a truly capitalist system. We actually have a mix of a very complex mix of capitalism and socialism. And to give you an example, right? So we've got market institutions which are capitalist, but then we've got regulatory and redistributive institutions that are completely socialists. So it's hard to say, because I can't think of one country that is completely capitalist in everything that they do, because it's a mix of both, right? Australia has really great healthcare. Who pays for that? Well, we all pay for that. How? Because we all contribute to Medicare. Some pay more. Some who earn enough pay a Medicare levy, and that affords all of us premium healthcare. That's a socialist end. But we're not. I wouldn't say that makes us a socialist country. It's to me, that's just a complex mix of capitalism and socialism working together. And I think you're saying that capitalism has produced some of these failures. To me, I can't think of. You have to show me an example of what those failures are and how capitalism is directly responsible for those failures.
So wait, hold on. What's your definition of socialism if you think that that we're in a mix of socialism and capitalism, just so that we get that straight. Because I would argue that we are definitely we have some socialist features,
Yeah,
but
that's
that's
my
not
point.
But that's what we're talking about.
That's his.
But
I think
that's
that's
not.
his point. I think
But
that's his
that's
point.
the point we're making.
Capitalism.
Well, okay. So here's the thing, right? Like when it comes to because all the time I often hear from people who try and either argue like, oh well, socialism, communism, Marxism, whatever you want to talk about, right? It's like, oh well, that's not true communism, or that's not true socialism.
I never said
and
that.
I think that's the no. I'm not saying
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't. I clearly said not.
Yeah,
not,
no,
not you.
okay, yeah. No, that's all right. That's all right. I'm just saying, like
I think you're
I
talking
wouldn't
to Tack,
wouldn't
right?
attribute that
That's
to
what
me.
Tack is.
Yeah, I was
saying.
talking to Tack.
Yeah,
I was talking to
that's
Tack.
exactly
No,
what I
but there are people who make the argument, oh well, like X or Y country, like they're not true, like socialism, or they're not true communism because they didn't do X, Y, or Z, right? And I think what Simon was pointing out is very similar to capitalism, because well, not every single country is a purely like capitalist nightmare where everyone's like entire livelihood is based on their performance, and if you don't give me those profits, you're out of the house, mate.
I'm only going to build this road if it's profitable for me. Like
if it's profitable, yeah.
But we're seeing that happening right now.
We've kind of agreed in social living in under a government and having a state provide certain features. We've agreed to a social contract, which is, well, we pay taxes to have these general services provided for us. Right now, nobody here is saying that taxation is theft or anything like that, right? Taxation is something that we can at least all agree to is something that's necessary for a functioning society, regardless of whether it is something that's capitalism or otherwise.
Yeah.
Yes. So I never said that. I never said that the state should be abolished. I never said that. I just said.
No.
Oh yeah. No. I'm just saying I didn't say you said that, but I'm saying I never said that the state should be abolished. I said that the people should own the means of production, because what we do have now is we have democracy in the social sense, in the political sense, but we don't have democracy in the work sense. So that's why I proposed the worker co-op solution, because then we don't only have democracy in the social and the political sense to just go vote for our government. We can go and have democracy in our workplace, which is something that everyone allows to happen, that allows a few minority of people to take control over and make decisions for the majority of people for the workplace, which you spend pretty much the majority of your day. So I see that as a threat, and I see capitalism as pretty much antithetical to democracy. So these things don't come together, because a minority is still, regardless of however you put it, in whatever country you put it, there is a minority taking control and lobbying in the state, taking control of state affairs and having a say on what kind of laws, what kind of things are being run in our society based on their profits and based on what they feel like the economy should be doing and how it should run.
So Ali, just wanted to ask you a question about, because I haven't heard about that, the whole system as well. How does one buy into that? Let's say, because you said like everyone who's working within that corporation, cooperative, is a part owner, right? So you get hired, and if you get hired, how do you become a part owner, or how does it get allocated? That's what I mean.
Do you want me to talk about cooperatives? I can talk about it, or do you want to talk about
I
billionaires?
think
I wouldn't want to go too deep into it, but just to give us, a rough idea on how it works, how the hiring process works, who comes into a cooperative, like how does that all go about?
Yeah, no, I think he's saying like, you know how like it's all publicly owned, not publicly owned, like owned by the people.
The people, people power, yeah.
Like let's say there's like 100 spots, right? Like how do I get that 101 spot?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I jump in? How do I make my co-op millions? Oh, sorry.
So
relative millions.
Don't say the M word, man.
Well, we're not canceling millionaires.
No, don't say the B word.
Okay, so I think a lot of you guys are thinking from a very capitalist-centric perspective, and this goes back to what I was talking about before in terms of surplus value. So the way the company starts, I don't know, you could get like a loan or whatever, and everyone owns this kind of enterprise. But let's just make sure and remember what I said before. I said that the definition of exploitation, the definition of surplus value that I said, where we have whether you know the market's free, planned. In history, it's been completely different, but that's a separate question. People are going to be getting and making the surplus value together, and the shares of the profits that they make are going to be distributed amongst them. So they don't have to buy into it because they're going to be adding value, and what from that value that they add, that's going to be distributed to the workers themselves. So I don't want to get too much into like cooperatives, but if you want to talk about it a little bit more, sure, we can like talk about it deeper in another time. But yeah,
I guess could you say in one sentence like how someone could be an employee of a something that's already owned?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Would it be that would it be that the people, and help my capitalist mind understand, right? If
the stream's going a little bit flaky, guys.
Sorry.
It's all right on mine.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Then. If 100 or so people partially own a workers' co-op, how can someone else kind of add value to the workers' co-op? Like, would they have to assist by like providing resources, or would it be that the company produces like a surplus, and then they're able to have an extra spot to allow someone to come in and also invest within the company? Like,
well, the thing is, I'm saying that their labor is the thing of value.
Okay, so that's how.
Yeah,
so
that's the
so I would
distinction.
work.
That's my thing. Yeah, I come from.
So could I just come
theory
into
of
the
value.
company and then start working for them?
Yeah, because just to make another just to add something onto this, the real good thing about this is the workers can decide and they have a say on who can get employed. So it's a democratically decided decision, and this adds on to the labor theory of value point, where their labor adds to the value of the cooperative, which means they're going to be sharing the surplus of the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of questions, but I think we're out of time, guys. And Ali, really thank you for coming on the show with us today and enlightening us with some socialist theories and the back and forth. And I think we all agree on the end goal. We maybe disagree on how we achieve that goal. And I'd like to have you on some future shows as well to discuss this in a little bit more detail, because we didn't really get to answer. We're just building up to answering the question: should billionaires exist? And we didn't quite get there.
It was a yes or no. It was a yes or no question.
Well, I think it's a consequence of capitalism, and you can't. The only reason we can't get rid of billionaires unless we get rid of capitalism. And so if you think capitalism is a failure, then we don't need we won't have billionaires. And if you think capitalism works and has worked and has proven to work, then you have to accept the consequence and the side effect of billionaires existing, but taxing them appropriately.
Yes. I guess this is something I want to pose to you guys. Do you think there is a system that, maybe not now, but in like next 5-10 years, maybe even more, that could be implemented to kind of, like as Simon mentioned, the hybrid between socialism and capitalism, like you don't have a country that's pure capitalism, right? It's a mix of both. Do you think there'll be a solution where we have a mix of like a hybrid of two other ideologies, and that will kind of fix
social democracy?
Yeah.
That's social democrat. That's what a social democrat
democratic
is. Really.
Socialism is the Bernie Sanders platform, right?
Yeah. Okay. So then, do you think that could be a solution?
Yeah, it could be a solution.
I think that might be a stepping stone. It might be a compromise between some of the failures that we see. I don't know. I need to think about it a little bit more. But there's features of democratic socialism that appeal to me. Adam?
No, I was just gonna say, like, chat, if you have any kind of thoughts, like, let us know what you guys think too.
Get your
I think the problem with something like capitalism, and I think I tend to view it under a different lens, right? Like as because I'm not an economist, I'm not a big brain accountant. I don't know how these numbers work, mate. But I see it more as a problem for like as a species that we are constantly struggling and fighting for what small amount of resources that are in on this planet, right? And functionally, people are going to be moved towards their own self-interest. So even if we start having a system that starts being stable for even a small period of time, it's only because we're producing surplus and we're able to functionally support multiple people and have like maybe a subjective line of happiness, right? But eventually, it will come to a point where there will not be enough resources or distribution of resources for people to be considered happy or survival, for survival. And that's my concern when it comes to the problem, right? When we have to start fighting over resources, and it tends to happen like, it happens with war, right? Like, people go to war over resources, right? And that's not going to change just because we move from a capitalist system to a socialist system or whatever system.
The chat is saying,
Of course it will.
Can we
The
focus
chat
on
has
the
spoken.
concept?
What did the chat say?
Can we focus on the concept of billionaires from an ethical standpoint next time? And that was followed up by part 2 next week.
Done.
Yeah,
Done.
sure.
You've
ethics
asked
of
for it. You get it. You get what
billionaires.
you want,
Yeah.
chat.
So there you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
The chat demands it. We love chat.
All right. I think that's a wrap for the show. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Ali, for joining us and enlightening us. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, I'm going to say the obvious things. Click on that subscribe thing on the top and like and do the needful. Do the needful, people.
Bell icon.
All right.
Patreon.
All of that.
All you have. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks.